Okay, well, welcome back. I recognize some of you were here last night at the launch, and what a magnificent moment that was to have Hetain Patel back at New Art Exchange after 2 years being on tour internationally and locally, and he's just come back from Chatterjee and Lal's gallery in January. Interestingly, Rashid's there now. Rashid was here when Hetain was launching in Mumbai. This is an amazing coincidence. We'd not planned this. It was one of those things that just happened. A zeitgeist moment, obviously. Like I said, it's great to have the warmth and wit and genius, I'd say, of Hetain Patel at New Art Exchange, returning back. And Hetain Patel, let me just say a few words about Hetain, and I'll read this because it's so detailed, so I need to read it for you. Hetain Patel is an interdisciplinary artist from a visual arts background. His award-winning work spans photography, video, and live performance. Since 2004, he has presented works worldwide in galleries, film festivals, and more recently in theatres. His practice interrogates various sensory forms of language, communication, and cultural identity. Hetain is represented in India by Gallery Chatterjee and Lal, who are here with us today. Thank you for coming. Where he recently had a solo exhibition in January 2012, as I said earlier. Recently this year in London, he was invited to be artist in resident at South Bank Centre in April 2012, just finished as part of the Alchemy Festival, in fact, invited by Jude Kelly. He has been commissioned by Tate to make new works for Tate Modern Oil Tanks in August 2012, which is a brilliant opportunity, and premiere a live performance, Be Like Water, at Royal Opera House in November 2012. This is a massive achievement. Of course, Hetain returns after a 2.5-year break at New Art Exchange to present the sole exhibition, as you've seen, of video and photography works downstairs at home. And that's commissioned by New Art Exchange. And in 2010, just some more history and relevance for today's talk, Hetain created and toured nationally his first piece for the theatre, and that was called 10. And 10 actually started here when New Art Exchange launched. So the seeds were sown at an early stage, and then Dance 4 took on the tour and further developed it with Hetain. And it toured everywhere, it seemed. In fact, this piece, which also completed a run at 2011 Sydney Festival in Australia, was selected for British Council's Edinburgh Showcase in 2011 and the British Dance Edition, London 2012. It will tour internationally in 2013 as well. Hetain has undertaken 3 substantial residencies over the past 5 years, including a summer at 501 Art Space in Chongqing, China, 2009, where he collaborated with visual artists, choreographers, and musicians. In addition to his practice, Hetain is a visiting lecturer at Nottingham Trent University in the Fine Art Department, where he graduated, in fact, in 2003. He has also served as a board member at Data Derby Dance and has been a member of the Regional Council for Arts Council England East Midlands.
Both of those are still going on.
Oh, they're still going on. Okay, that's good. I haven't got time for all that. Okay, Hetain. Let's get into the talk, shall we? The format of the talk is I'm going to ask some questions, and then we can open it out to the floor to get a Q&A from yourselves. I'm sure you've got loads of questions lined up to Hetain today. I'm going to start with an obvious icebreaker around inspirations and influences, actually, and early memories. Because at New Art Exchange, we're very interested in the trajectory and the development of an artist and how an artist moves from A to B and eventually becomes to a space where you're now exploring, from being a local lad from Bolton up north, from a working class family, now rubbing shoulders in international spaces. And that trajectory is really important for us to understand. But it all starts earlier on. So what were your earlier influences in your life?
We spoke a little bit about this earlier with Skinder, and I was trying to remember what my first experience with, I guess, what we'd call art is. And I guess it's from my dad drawing his. My dad, as if you've seen the work downstairs, he works with cars and extends cars into limousines and hearses for the funeral trade, and he's kind of quite sought after in terms of his design of these things, and it's, I guess now in car industries it might be done on CAD or computer or this or that, and I guess my memory of him is he used to have a bit of paper which had one of these sideways profiles of a car. He'd photocopy this twice, bend it a bit to make it into a limousine, and then get a biro and kind of draw in the design, and then somehow later on a car appeared, as a limousine or a hearse, and I kind of have memories of that, of kind of seeing that happening, of this kind of magic thing of going from a car to a limousine, like this, and he'd drawn something in between and what it becomes, and so I think that was a really early thing for me, and then I guess throughout my education, actually, from being very young, I think it was from drawing, actually, or I guess probably because drawing is the thing that's from very early on considered to be art, isn't it? If you're good at drawing, you're an artist, aren't you? It's as being a kid, and I was always good at drawing. I could always draw something that looked like something, if that's what good at drawing means then. So there was that, and I guess another very early thing, which I should maybe, when I was at, I can't remember if my mum told me this or whether I remember this actually, but at a nursery, they used to set us up with easels for painting time, and they used to give you a pot of paint, one colour, a big fat brush, and a bit of paper there. People used to draw stick people of, this is mummy, this is daddy, this is my dog, and every time I used to just paint the whole thing, just in one colour, whatever colour it was, and then I used to move the clip and paint under that as well, so it was just completely covered. And I guess the reason I mentioned that is, in some of my earlier photography work, I feel like I'm still doing this. Where have I put that file? In the first body decorative works, if you like, that I made, it was this. So and then I was kind of, I guess it's something about being seduced by the material or the process of something. So this idea of covering a space with something, with colour or whatever it is, and I think I still have that now. So no matter what conceptually the work is and what I'm doing, I always get seduced by and allow myself to get seduced by the process or the media. So whether it's photography and kind of loving photographing and printing and colour, or whether it's kind of in the body decorative works of kind of enjoying seeing a lot of it, or if it's covering the body to cover a lot of it, or whatever it is. So I guess that's kind of early.
And the body's featured throughout in terms of influencing the work that you create. Tell us about how the body is so central in your work then.
I never really considered it to be honest, until after I left uni. I would always use the body, funnily enough. I should explain, when I was studying fine art at Trent, a lot of my earlier works used to be quite sculptural, so it used to be based with text. I used to write a lot onto paper, onto canvas, onto masking tape, writing, then covering it, the writing, then covering it, and then I would destroy it in some way or sculpt it into something which made the text unrecognizable. I didn't want people to read whatever I was writing, and so they would end up as little objects. And I guess the subject matter of what I was writing about isn't necessarily so far off the subject matter of my work now, but I was kind of embarrassed by, I hated the idea of talking about something, about my heritage, about my culture. It felt really obvious or something, so I wanted to change it into something else. So I'd make these sculptural objects, except that became quite frustrating because it felt like I wanted to write and write and write, but I could never write enough about this thing, it just words after words. And then at some point I just wrote something onto my arm, and I think it was after a night out probably, and you know, I didn't want to go into uni, and I wrote something on my arm, and I liked it, and I just carried on, and you know, I didn't just write a bit. I kept writing until the pen ran out, and you know, I was here, and I got to about here, I think, and then I took some photographs with whatever kind of crappy camera I had at the time, and then I got them back, and I looked at them, and I think that was a turning point for me, probably towards the end of the second year in my degree, of it being very much about the body, and you know, I was in a very naive sense, you know, I had no awareness as such that this was about the body, or that it would continue being about that. So yeah, I think that's where it started, and then my tutors would always tell me, you know, I was presenting them as photographs because, again, I love this seductive quality of someone taught me about how to make these beautiful prints in the darkroom and using good cameras. And you know, my tutors would always say, you should make it into video. You know, you should video yourself doing these things and look at the process. And I hated that idea. You know, I wouldn't hear of it. You know, I was not a performance artist. Performance artists are weird. You know, this was genuinely my attitude at that stage. I feel it's quite conservative. So you know, I would have these photographs, and you know, I don't want to make videos. And I think I made one. I never showed it to anyone. I just did it because my tutor wanted to, so I could hand it in to try and get a better grade. You know, and I never touched video until I left uni, until probably a year after having graduated. And the only reason I did then actually was because I started to become frustrated with solely using photography. So you know, I don't know if I should go into this now. Or
Yeah, well, it's interesting about the sort of influences at that early stage and how they then transpire into different mediums of your work. In terms of coming out of university, you'd finished in 2003. Tell us about some of the stages of your career development that started to influence your chain of thought in regard to taking you through a journey to where you are today. So, for example, I know that in 2003, for example, 2003 to 2004, you would have had, interestingly, a show here at the Old Art Exchange through an organisation called Up and Arts. And then it moved into a big Decibel investment. And Decibel was a big national initiative. And then you had a residency at Lakeside. You were part of UK Young Artists. You then went on to produce 10, and it's moved on since then. So it's it's post-graduation and that influence at that moment, and the change of style of work and mediums that came through that process.
I think professionally, one of the big things that opened up things for me, as soon as I graduated, I went traveling, or I went to do one of those Camp America schemes, 4 months in the US, just on my own. And so I worked at this camp for 2 months, and then the money I earned from that, I went traveling around the US for 2 months. And then this traveling around the US, I was pretty much doing by bus or by coach. So just to get from one city to another, you know, you'd have to sit on this bus for, say, 20 hours. And, you know, just to get from and this was a normal thing being done out there. And, you know, after doing that, when you come back to the UK, you really appreciate what a teeny tiny island we live on. And then you have, from that, you have no excuse not to go anywhere. So, you know, I was in Nottingham, you know, the natural inclination might be to say, oh, can't go to this meeting or opening or exhibition in London, it's 2 hours away. Ooh. You know, and you know, it's a normal thing. So I think this process of traveling around America really impacted on me. And from then on, I really actively got out there to kind of go see exhibitions and try to meet curators and other artists and this kind of thing. And then I guess I did what was probably maybe every artist does. I don't know in the UK is. If you know the artist newsletter, which has a lot of information for kind of emerging artists, including a lot of opportunities, residencies, schemes, and all this kind of thing. So I just started applying for anything and everything, group exhibitions, residencies, most of them which you have to pay something to be considered for it. So I just applied for everything, and I got lots of little thin letters through the letterbox saying, thank you and no thanks. And I think that toughens you up. It makes you resilient. Makes you take it less personal. It can feel like a real kick in the teeth at the start. When you're making work that's personal and someone tells you no. It's like they're telling you no. And then I got this residency at 2021 Visual Arts Centre in Scunthorpe for 3 months, which gave me some time and some space and some money to make a new body of work. So that body of work started as a continuation from this graduation piece, and I explored further these earlier henna mehndi works, which I created during this first residency, and then towards the end, and then at the end of this exhibition is when I spoke to Apner Arts, the previous art exchange, and they gave me my first exhibition. So I was able to display the works in what was the old building, if any of you kind of remember that. And this is a bit later. I'll leave that up. And so that experience of being given an exhibition, and actually every experience from then is, I guess, to kind of tie them all together, is you do something which you previously think you're incapable of doing, or that you can't imagine yourself being able to do, or that you think you're not worthy to be able to do it. So, wow, someone's given me an exhibition. I can't believe someone would want to show my work. I sold a piece during that exhibition, actually to the Lakeside Arts Centre. It's still up in their cafe there. The idea that someone would want to buy some work. Well, actually, that's not true. The first person to buy some work was Frank Abbott, one of my tutors.
Oh, really? He's a good investor, actually. He's a good talent spotter.
From my degree show. But the idea that, so when something new happens that hasn't happened before, somebody gives you an exhibition, they show your work, they invest in you to have a residency, they buy some work, whatever it is. And then the Decibel Award, which was a year, which was a lot of money. It was £30,000 over 2 years, which was a very competitive process to go through to win that. And the best thing about that was probably pre the award in a way. So, in trying to think about what you would do with £30,000 over 2 years was a really great exercise in thinking what I actually wanted to do. Someone's giving you a dream ticket here, what would you do with that? So, it's not as simple as, I want to make work. How, why? It's like, as well as underpinning kind of what you want to explore subject matter wise, it's trying to underpin what it means professionally as an artist. So securing studio space, time to work, equipment, going to meet certain people, going abroad to go to conferences, to meet certain galleries, to start a website, to go to networking events, all the things that kind of, to get a mentor, to mentor me professionally. And so I really feel like these 2 years really set me up, really give me a momentum to do everything after that. And then other notable things, some of the things that came whilst I was on this Decibel Award was a residency at the Lakeside Arts Centre. And again, it was this massive self-confidence thing that someone would have you there for a year or 2 years in a studio and to call you their artist in residence. It sounds like a silly thing, but it's something that has to happen in your head for you to believe that you're an artist and to continue believing that you're an artist. It's kind of like, I guess when you start out, you might do part-time work in a bar or whatever it is, and then you do your artist thing on the side. I think it's very telling when you introduce yourself to someone to say what you do. If you say, "Oh, I work in this bar down the road, and also I'm an artist," it's kind of to switch that around, and it's actually, no, you're an artist, and the bar work pays for you to do that. So I think it's something. All of those things that happened helped to cement this into my head of feeling, of being an artist, and I think that's really important. And then I guess one of the major exhibitions for me, solo exhibition, was actually through someone I met at my first exhibition at the Art Exchange, which was, I think, Kathy actually, who was at the City Gallery at the time. And then a few years later, she kind of worked with me and instigated a national tour of my first national solo touring exhibition, which was a collaborative project with Jason Singh. And this again was a massive thing for me to be invested in, not just by the partners involved, but in terms of the Arts Council funding and in order to invest in you to make work and to get it out there. This is a great business card for me.
So what I'm hearing is that the initial investment from learning at Nottingham Trent University to the experiences of getting a strong investment from Arts Council through the Decibel Award gave you such structure and gave you a strong business sense as well as an artistic exploration. And today, the separation between a businessman and an artist is often a thin line, and you have to think as a brand often in terms of how you work and where you work and think ahead and so forth. Okay, let's look into some of the sort of the mediums now in terms of, because we've got a good sense of the history and where you've come from, and but it's interesting that in your early days you were known for sort of body art, photography, etc. But you did bring a strong performative element into your practice, and you were saying earlier that you were quite conservative about it. What was the defining moment at that moment? And when was that you brought the performing element into it? Was it 10 or was it before 10?
It was before, actually. It was these body of photographs that I produced. Yeah. I exhibited them a lot in the UK just through actively kind of approaching galleries and things like this. And when I say exhibit them, it's not the gallery at that time. It's not that the gallery sends people and they pick up your work and they install it. It's you put the pictures into the boot of your car. You drive up and you use one knee to hold the picture up while you screw this side and then screw this side. It's really putting them up. So you really see them, all the time. And I guess they started to feel a bit static. It was maybe as simple as that. They started to feel a bit static, and it felt like I wanted there to be less distance between the viewer and and the process in the work. So initially, the reason for making them photographic works was that I liked the idea. At the time, I was looking at this idea of what I consider to be a heritage, my Indian heritage, if you like, and the fact that I've not been born and raised in India. I've been presented with what my mum and dad came over with in 1967. So kind of the 1967 India, if you like, or whatever it is. I've not been privy to what came before that. So it's almost like being presented with this current product, and this is what you have to go off, if you like, in and amongst the British society in which you live. So I was trying to do that in the photographs. So by only giving this end still of this process, by taking the process away from the viewer, that you have to imagine what happened before you just given the end product. That was the idea behind that. But then after exhibiting them for so long, they started to be very static, and I started to make videos out of them. Mm. So I would video the process and make them into time-lapse videos. So there'd be 10 minutes video process showing this, for example. And then that went further, and I wanted to take the distance away further, and I almost wanted people to smell the mehndi in the air, or be able to come up closer and see it happening, or experience the durational aspect of it. So I started doing it as performance within galleries. So it might be a 4, 5, 6 hour performance where I'm in the space decorating myself. So I guess that's where the performance.
And were there any artistic influences that you were drawing from, i.e. from your mentors or from artists that you were observing, or certain aesthetics that were being developed at the time that you were referring to, dipping in and out of, and learning from and influencing your work? Because whenever I think of your work, I always think of it that you are the source of thought. But obviously you are influenced by others around you. Were there any other artists at the time that you were thinking, yes, you mentioned that Frank in your early days was saying capture the process, And I know that he's into video and filmmaking himself. But were there other artists at the time that were, more established, that were influencing your thinking? And who were they?
I would say that in terms of visually, I don't think it was necessarily any artists.
No.
I mean, actually, conceptually, it definitely was.
Yes.
Conceptually, I was very influenced by Bruce Nauman.
Uh-huh.
He was a real, and still is a real hero of mine. In terms of in terms of the representation of the body within a frame, within a 2D frame, through video, and what he does with that, and this idea that if you film yourself doing anything in a studio, is it considered art, or can you consider it art activity? I love this idea, and I love the idea, and conceptually I was always highly interested by semiotics and language theory. This idea that you think language, and that you think through the language, you think through the codes of your first language, and that even when you learn a second language, you learn it through the codes of whichever one is your first. So that was really influential. It didn't necessarily come out directly in the work, but
No.
this was always with me. I guess aesthetically, I was influenced by fashion photography, by MTV music videos.
Yes.
This is what I would watch.
Yeah.
It's kind of and artistically, there was still kind of links into what I loved when I was at school. Renaissance, kind of Caravaggio. These are the people that I loved. I trained at school to do oil paintings.
Yes.
That's what I used to do, take pictures of people with a light bulb shining from one side to the other, and then paint it in oil paints.
And talking of mediums then, you seem to utilise many mediums, and they're constantly shifting. Where will you go in the future? Are there any limits to the mediums that you want to explore, bring into your work? Have you got any mediums earmarked that you've not explored, for example? You seem to do everything, including comedy.
Well, it's funny. I guess I get asked quite a lot about this thing of changing mediums between photography, video, live work, theatre, or whatever, and I don't necessarily feel like I do it consciously. I mean, once I'm in there, then of course I engage with it. Yes. And the formalities of it. So, for example, if I find myself making a work in a theatre context, then of course I engage with the language of theatre. So, what do people think and feel when they come to see a theatre piece, and how do I feel when I go to see something in that context? How do I understand something, and what is that exchange? But in terms of how it ended up in there in the first place, it feels quite instinctive, and I think the reason behind that is that there is a base that goes through all of that, which is the body. Understanding the world, if you like, through the body, and its communicative abilities or inabilities, and this applies to so many things. I guess obvious ones in a way are representations of the body through photography, through video, through interacting with people in a live scenario, in theatre, in comedy. And I feel also this about the trajectory of my practice. I've been thinking about works recently, something I want to do in animation and in sculpture.
Okay.
And 5 years ago, I would never have considered this. I hate the idea that you would just pick up a medium for the sake of it. Oh,
yes.
This would be cool. Let's
Sure.
try this kind of thing. I don't really work like that, or
Indeed.
think like that. It still comes from the body. It's like, in a way, I find it weirder just to be a photographer or just to work in video. It's kind of, it's not the medium as, although I do get seduced by the medium and are interested in each medium, that isn't the core of where the work comes from.
No.
Because the core of where the work comes from is the body, it feels like any media that can be, there are other media which can be expressed.
What I enjoy about your work, Hetain, is the fact that it's so deeply layered, and then it has this wonderful gloss of humour that embodies it all, or connects it. Where does the humour come from in your work?
My mum and dad. No, Dad's a bit of a joker.
He is, isn't he?
I guess it's just,
It's
part of
inherited.
what makes our characters in a way. Humour is a big influence on me as well. As a kid, I grew up on Eddie Murphy films.
Yes.
You know, I kind of know them back to front, and they're the things that we would quote and see on the TV, and right through to more recently, you know, the British humour. You know, I guess if you were to ask me in a way what would characterise me as British, mostly I would say it's the humour. You know, I'm a massive fan of The Office, of The In-Betweeners, of the Fast Show when it was there, of Peep Show. You know, all these kind of things that are kind of this British humour, whatever qualities they have of self-deprecating or close to the bone, or something real almost in an uncomfortable way.
Yes.
You know, and I love that. And then in terms of it within my own performance, you know, I guess the humour's always been there subtly in the work. In terms of the performance work, in the comedy elements in my theatrical work, it actually started from a best man speech at my friend's wedding.
Okay.
And maybe in 2008.
Sounds like a new piece of work coming out of this.
Well, I didn't actually consider I didn't actually consider it a piece of work. It was Eva who actually said at the end, I hope these people realise you were testing a piece of work out on them. And I didn't think about that at the time. It was because my friend, you know, it's a massive wedding. There was 300-400 people, and we were sort of half split with kind of an Indian audience and an English audience. And so this was the material I wrote around. I loved it. You know,
Yeah.
I kind of, you know, I enjoyed it so much, and
Yes.
it's really where 10 came from, you
Right.
know, or being brave enough to want to do something like that. You know, this thing where you write something and you actually have to improvise it depending on what the audience give you or not. It was so exciting. You know, it's a whole different kind of liveness than doing a durational performance, which is a very different kind of energy that you exchange with people viewing.
Okay, on the note of performance and visual arts, because you do experience working in both forms, and with 10, for example, contrasted with At Home, for example, are two, in many ways, you know, the mediums are part of the same world of art, etc., culture, etc. However, the environments are different. And is there a difference in the environments from your perspective? And what are the processes and expectations that you come across, and the types of audiences that feature in those different worlds?
In the visual and performing arts?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because there can be a hierarchy in the artistic world.
Yeah, of course.
And that plays out sometimes in terms of how you as an artist interact and switch from one form to the next. So the distinct difference of going on a tour, for example, in a theatre space, to, you know, presenting in a visual arts conceptual space.
Yeah. I guess as soon as I started touring around theatre, I think it became more apparent to me how little audience crossover there is between kind of gallery audiences and theatre audiences. And I found this really weird, you know, and then as I started to tour, that people might be really aware of my performance work, like 10, but have no idea that I would have exhibitions as well, or likewise, people might come to exhibitions and have never seen a theatrical work of mine and not know that I do that, and because the work comes from one place, you know, they formally come out as something different, you know, depending on how the medium of the work, but they come from a similar place, and I really feel like people who come and enjoy the theatre work would kind of dig the gallery work, and vice versa. So it's actually something I'm trying to address at the minute. So this exhibition, which your good selves are looking to tour nationally, trying to tour it with a live work that I'm making called Be Like Water, which is a live work which is looking at the middle ground of where my live practice meets my video art practice. And it's going to be done in theatre context. It will launch at the Royal Opera House at the end of this year, and we're trying to interweave them some way, so that, for example, if the gallery tour goes to a city, that maybe the theatre performance will be performed either in the gallery, or if it's an art centre, or at a theatre that's in that city at the same time, and to try and find ways to get those audiences to cross over and engage and have a dialogue between the two. And I find people talk about the work differently as well, or I guess with different reference points. You know,
Okay, I mean, in talking about audiences and talking about how you make work, Do you consciously make work so that it has sort of the audience in mind in any way, so that it is accessible or it relates to the relevance of an audience experience in context?
It's a hard one to answer that in a way. You know, I can't sit there and say I just make the work for myself. It's kind of, I'm not sure what that means.
No.
If I did, I wouldn't exhibit it. You know, I would just do it in the studio and I would just look at it myself on my laptop.
Yes, I mean, it was something that Rashid said last time in his talk, that he talked very deliberately about the act of making work that was relatable and accessible, but at the same time, profoundly high art, you know. Do you have a similar thought around that type of style of working?
I guess the desire would be that it's layered enough to that different demographics of people can engage with it in some way. You know, like the Simpsons.
Yes.
You know, kind of, you can put an episode of The Simpsons on and you know, kids can enjoy it because it's animation and there's some little gags in there, and yet you sit an adult in front of it and they can get the rude jokes in it. You know, it's kind of, I feel like I really enjoy the idea of making work like that. So, and also it's important that when I make work that I would engage with, or that I want to see, basically. So, you know, like for example, most of my video works are between 6 and 10 minutes. You know, I guess in terms of thinking about how long I would engage with a video work in a gallery, as opposed to going and seeing a film screening or whatever it is. And as to why I started to make the henna works as time-lapse. The live works, if I go to see live performance, I guess I'm slightly less engaged with abstract live performance, and I'm more taken with direct-to-dress performance, or something that has humour in it, or comedy in it, but not humour for humour's sake, but as a tool to illustrate a more serious point, or as a tool to express a more serious point. So, for example, in 10, the live piece, I start the performance, if any of you have ever seen it, I start the performance as if I'm giving an introduction to the audience, welcome them for coming, and I want to give you a bit of background to the work, and then slowly it merges into the performance, and you kind of don't realise it starts. And the reason I wanted to do that is that I like the idea that you get an audience before they put their performance watching face on, you know, so you kind of, they're kind of relaxed, and they're kind of open to something that's real, or that isn't performed, which is important to me in terms of it trying to embed a level of honesty in. So I guess in terms of engagement, I guess it's trying to engage with people, to not allow them to put a barrier up of some sort. So I think that's why, if certain elements of my work are considered to be accessible, it's because it's the way I enjoy accessing other people's work.
Okay. And yesterday, obviously, we had the launch, and obviously there was many audiences there. Were there any poignant reactions to the work yesterday? And not just yesterday, maybe throughout your history. Have there been audience reactions that have influenced then your direction? Because it's always brilliant to get that audience interaction with the work and see how the work does affect an individual.
Well, I guess in reference to what I've just been saying before, that was one of the reasons that some things started to change. So I feel like this exhibition downstairs is felt like a bit of a turning point in my practice in a lot of ways. So works like this that kind of got exhibited around, when exhibited largely in the UK, as you can probably see, there's kind of, you would see it with there's an exotic veneer on there.
Yes.
And whether even if you enjoy them, you kind of see them as something other, or when I talk about this idea of putting a barrier up, it doesn't necessarily mean you have a negative response to the work. Right. It can just mean you see it and go, oh, right, something Indian. Okay, I get it. You know, or you know, and once that's up, that it feels like I lose any ability to be able to engage with something further than that, and I find that really restrictive. And one, in terms of my lack of authority, if you like, to command anything Indian, but also in terms of not being able to engage with any other layers in the work. So this is what, in a way, why I made the live work 10. The idea was that was in a way to express my Englishness, to be on stage talking as me, talking about and for that to come across. The first piece of work, gallery-based work that I've made that I felt made that change as well is To Dance Like Your Dad, that I made of my dad. And this was the first work at it was the opening we had here as well in 2009.
Yeah.
It was the first work that people would come to me in the opening and tell me stories about their dad. They almost wouldn't talk about the work. Everyone told me a story about their dad. And, I loved that. It was amazing.
It was fascinating.
I've never had that,
I mean, what was fascinating about that piece was that the title itself drew so many people in to dance, to dance like your dad. You have this very clumsy image of your dad jumping around, and that's the image that one has before going into the exhibition. But then the exhibition explores the choreography of your dad in a metal bashing workshop, and it's quite brilliantly done in terms of it looks at the skill versus inheritance, or learnt behaviours versus inheritance, genetics, and so forth. And in that piece, you do explore the nature-nurture rationale, i.e. what is inherited and what is imitated. And it's quite a fascinating and a very intricate piece of work, again, very multi-layered. Tell us a little bit more about the nature-nurture relationship with your dad and that piece, and maybe the process of making it.
I should say, before I made that piece,
Yeah.
I made some pieces like this.
Ah.
So I was taking pictures of my family members as a way to kind of, I guess, it sounds kind of crass in a way, to explore this generation. Not crass, but it felt kind of obvious to me at the start. But I wanted to try it of looking at the immediate generation before me in order to explore identity things. And so I was taking pictures of my dad, my mum, my gran, and when I got them, I loved the pictures to put on my wall, but as artworks, I never really felt that they were successful artworks. I kind of felt like if I would have seen them in a space, I would have seen a nice photograph, but it's somebody else's dad, it's somebody else's mum, so what? And so I struggled with how, I dropped this after a while, and I struggled with how to do that level of engagement. And then with my dad, it kind of happened by accident. The video that you see downstairs that I've used, it was never intended as an artwork. I shot that video for my dad in order to I said, let's shoot a fake video of you giving a tour of your factory. I'll give it to a proper filmmaker. He can make it a nice one like that, and we'll put it on your website and, to advertise your business. And we never went through to those second stages of advertising the business, but I used this footage later on and decided that I wanted to do this. And I guess also because of how interesting it was how engaged my dad was in that process. My dad's always at work. He's not at work now, but he I would think he was. He's not here. It's kind of he's always at work, and it's almost like this is what he knows and breathes and talks about. He's not if you met him last night, he's not necessarily a conversationalist, but if you ask him about these, and he can tell you everything from the dimensions to the millimeters to whatever. So I found this fascinating, and I like this idea of engaging with my dad this way, so this is how this piece came about. And I think the thing that was gratifying for me was not necessarily even just people's response to telling me about their dads, but my dad's response to it. It felt, in other artworks that I've done, I don't necessarily demand an engagement as such from family members into all of the content of it. They're very proud of me in terms of what I do professionally, but in this piece I felt like I'd gone past a certain barrier, or I'd broken a barrier, or my dad really loved it, and the fact that that I could make a piece of work that I consider to be, it's not dumbed down in the slightest. It's to the best of my ability in terms of making a piece of artwork, and that gallerists can enjoy it. It's going to be part of one of the things that's going to be shown at the Tate. But at the same time, my dad can, and it's the first piece that my dad said, can I have a copy of that? Show my mates. It's like, it was really great that piece did for me. And in a way, that's why that piece is in the exhibition downstairs, even though it's slightly older than all the others. I feel like that was the turning point in my thinking around how all the other works came about.
Yes, and there's an interesting twist and tail to Dance Like Your Dad. I was talking to Mort yesterday. I'll probably share that story another time, but there was an interesting link between Mort, his cousin, and that piece, and yourself.
Yeah.
And, there's a very interesting story, but we won't go into that just now. Mamai, okay, this has been quite a powerful piece of work. The piece explores time and memory, both crystallized and short term. And the process in making that with your grandma as the prism that explores how faith and ritual kind of feed the body's long-term memory. What was the process in making that? And did you get grandma to sign the disclaimer? I bet you didn't.
Not quite. All the permission, if you like, went through my mum.
Okay.
Because my grandma, she's nearly or just over, or we don't actually know, around 100 years old, which my family have kind of figured out through the ages of all her children, and so even seeing her in that state, it's kind of incredible that she's still walking and talking and praying, and she doesn't see very well or hear very well. And so I remember when I first started doing these photographic works, when she would come around, when she'd be at the house, I'd try to explain to her what I do. We'd show her big photographs and all these kind of things. And understandably, she wouldn't understand it. She actually thinks I have a shop. And every time I come round now, she says, "How's the shop?" And I just go along with it now. And if Eva's not with me, she'll say, "Oh, is Eva standing in the shop while you're here?" Or, engagement is very different this way, and so you can't necessarily have a conversation as such with her. But this thing that she does, it's incredible. When my mum tells me that the words that she uses in her prayers are very old, that they're not sung anymore. And I guess I was interested by this idea that when she passes, that maybe no one will sing them anymore, and that I guess I wanted to document this. If I have children, that it's something that I would want them to see, it's kind of I wanted to document this, and it's such a beautiful thing, and also at the time I just got this beautiful HD video camera. It was SLR camera, and so I was, seduced with filming things, and so I started filming my gran and doing this process, and she would do it for about the same amount of time every morning, and it was through watching this footage that I noticed something else every time I filmed it, which was my mum coming in, and this ritual which I never see, which is her touching my grandmother's feet, which is a mark of respect. In the Indian culture for your elders, and then they're reciprocated by this blessing that my gran gives to my mother of touching her head. I would see this just from the video, and so when you have a collection of them together, it became this. The piece kind of made itself. I kind of feel like this about a lot of the works actually, that you just need to. It's just about looking. I try to do that.
Yes, and you use the 5 screens. Just explain what you're doing with the 5 screens, the whole sequence of multiple pasts and so forth, and playing with time itself.
Sure.
It's a big thing to play against.
Well, I guess one of the reasons is this idea that if I just show a picture of my gran, I can make a beautiful picture of her, but then for a piece of artwork, it's kind of, okay, it's somebody's grandmother's, so what, it's nice, but whatever. Yeah. So by putting multiples of that, I feel like it offers a job for the viewer to do. It kind of, especially if you see the other works, because they're similar looking, your natural inclination is to look for the synchrony in it. Of, is this the same body? You notice the clothes are slightly different, the framing's slightly different, When my mum comes in, she's wearing something different. So they're obviously different days. And because it's the ritualistic aspect that I was interested in, of repetition of something happening, I guess it was natural that you had to take it from different days. So you sort of see a repetition and ritual. And then in terms of what it displays and what my mum was telling me about the words that she sings, you know, her memory, as you might imagine, is not fantastic. So when she's singing those prayers, she's not remembering, I guess what I was trying to do, she's not remembering the prayers that she sang the day before or the week before or the month before. You know, she's remembering these words that have been hardwired into her body and her memory and her vocal cords and mouth from probably nearly 100 years ago, you know,
That's phenomenal.
which has come from her mother.
And talking about memory, you talk about in your writing for this piece, where you're exploring faith and ritual that feeds the body's long-term memory. What do you mean by this? Because I thought, you know, memory is in the mind, or is it in our body too? Is that what you're referring to here?
Somewhere in that area. I think it's. Yeah, you know, things can be hardwired into your bodies. Yes. You know, I guess we know this from learning language or learning to walk or to swim or to, you know, they say it's as easy as riding a bike. You know, I guess that phrase is there for a reason. It's like this, and you know, it's there's so many things that are passed down not through an instruction manual, but through passing it down physically. So from prayer and ritual to riding a bike to swimming to whatever it is. So I feel like it's this that I'm quite interested in, of what a body can hold, or you know, that's less tangible than words. That's that not only does it hold, but it evolves in some ways. So if I learn this kung fu routine for this piece downstairs, it will sit in my body in a particular way. And if 10 years from now, I might still have that memory in my body, but what my body's capable of doing, it will bring it out in a different way. So it's still operating from that same instruction, that same hardwiredness, but it's trying to output it in a different body, or the one that you've currently got to work with.
Fascinating about the body triggering the mind, and the mind triggering the body, and the play between the two there, and also the play between the crystallized memory of actual thought that relates to scriptures from 100 years ago that you would have learned, maybe 90 years ago, to the short-term movement that she goes through in a ritualistic manner every day. And the culmination of that time sequence when she says, "Hey Bhagwan," I think that's quite a powerful moment of synchronicity of time, the convergence of time and memory all happening in that similar moment. It's quite a magnificent thing. In terms of the placing of the screens on the floor and not the wall, is there an aesthetic, or is there a style there, or is it...
We didn't have time to put on the wall.
That's what I thought. No, it's not that.
No, it's, I guess, with the nature of it, with it being domestic, aesthetic, and with it trying to be quite familial, you know, it felt like putting them on the wall would be too fixed or too sleek or too formal, if you like. I like the idea that when the screens are on the floor, I know they're quite big, but I like the idea that they're lent against something, that they're not fixed, so that if you wanted to, you could pick it up. You know, I like the idea that the point of synchronization is this point where my mother touches my grandmother's feet. So this idea of that you'll be watching it, and if you're close to it, you know, these screens are by your feet, and you know, I like the relating those bodies on the screen to the body of the viewer. So, and then having them at that level, I'm interested to see how people engage with them. Do people stand with it? Will they go from a distance and sit back? Will they? If I would watch something like that, it would make me want to crouch down and to be with that figure. And so I'm interested to see how people interact with it. So it becomes much more of a sculptural piece, or a much more of a sculptural and performative piece as to how you engage with those works.
Yes. And that is the swinging between those multi-mediums, but engaging the audience in that interactive way to actually experience it themselves as if they are part of the performance. I certainly observed yesterday from conversations that was probably the most intimate piece that people received yesterday, because of the nature of how it was placed and positioned and how it's filmed, and of course the synchronicity with the culmination of Hey Bhagwan was such a powerful voice, and you could not compete with this, even with our speeches at the beginning of the show. She was resonated throughout the gallery. Okay, let's move to first stands, because this is quite has many sort of interesting features, with superheroes featuring the juxtaposition of cinematics and domestic kind of referencing, and of course the new relationship with Eva as your recently wedded wife now. And so tell us more about this piece, because Kung Fu features and there are some interesting stories behind how it was made. The reference of the costumes are also symbolic in the actual piece.
Yeah,
and there's a real funny shot of the making of this that was quite interesting. I thought would be nice to bring a bit of humour into our conversation.
Let's see. I know. So that piece, I guess, came from a few ideas, and one is that as a memory of from being a child, occasionally we would have to wear the kind of Indian male outfit of the kurta pajama, and me and my brother, my cousins, it's not something we would enjoy doing. It's embarrassing. Like when the other kids weren't wearing it, or it's the kind of thing you might get bullied for or whatever, and it doesn't feel right. Yeah. And then that felt like there was a change happened there from when we would start to see kung fu movies, and then suddenly these grandmasters on TV, on films, were wearing something that looked a bit like what we were wearing, and then it became like, right, okay, I'm a kung fu warrior or whatever, So all this idea that you have secretly inside you that nobody else knows that you're a kung fu warrior, and I guess it was that idea of, you watch so many kung fu films that it's this idea that somehow it's a question, does it feel more comfortable for me to act and feel like a kung fu warrior in that outfit than more so than it does to make me feel like an Indian boy or whatever that means. So part of it comes from that in terms of the attire in there. And also I like the link into adulthood as well. Even these things that we laugh and joke about, remember when we used to be into Spider-Man or Bruce Lee or whatever. If you were properly into them and not just surfacely into them, you don't lose being into them. And so it might not be Bruce Lee anymore because sadly he's not around, but it might be the next kung fu film that comes out. And when you see that at the cinema, there's still something in you that wants to do that. Go away and dedicate 10 years of your life to the sword. And that's, it's half funny, but it's half, you feel it in your body. It's kind of, it could be for whatever, it doesn't have to come for you. I'm sure you have your own things, but it's addressing some of that. And then because the piece, it's kind of come about at the time when I was getting married, and as part of our wedding ceremonies, we had one of the ceremonies we had was a Hindu ceremony in which we both wore traditional clothing for that, and I guess it's referencing in a way this different personas you take on in your life, whether it's your domestic persona at home, you talk to your friends and family, to a more celebratory one when you kind of adorn a suit or whatever it is, and how that might make you feel or what you use it for. And so I like the idea of putting these two things together in one in the video. So the adorned bodies along with the domesticated bodies, and the kung fu coming from, and the kung fu attire relating to not just the wedding sherwani, but also to the dressing gown. Joke around with the dressing gown, and a nod to when we were at school in the physics classes of using the meter rules as samurai swords, or this kind of thing.
When the teacher wasn't watching.
Yeah, or sometimes when they were watching.
Probably joining in.
This is also my little Bruce Nauman nod as well, of some of his videos. If you're not familiar with his work, some of his very early works, which were very influential to me, is he would set up a camera on a tripod and just leave it running for the full duration of the tape, which is maybe 10 minutes, and he would do some kind of repetitive or inane activity in his studio, whether it's walking in a square or in a slow motion or whatever. And so this is in a way the process of me trying to see what this kung fu would look like. This is in the studio at Lakeside Art Centre, where I used to be artist in residence. I hadn't gotten onto the ruler then, I was using an umbrella. And so this is after I kind of spent a day learning this choreography. I found the lightest umbrella I could find. And I'd set the camera up in these different angles to try a few things together and then take them onto the edit suite and synchronize them and things like this. And which kind of eventually led to the piece that you see downstairs. And we went through a few different filming processes of that. The first one we filmed was kind of at 4 in the morning one summer, because it was daylight then, and we were trying to avoid our neighbors seeing anything. So they didn't think we were weirdos, and so we filmed that, and we had a version of it, and then some parts needed to be refilmed, but it was kind of autumn winter by then. So in order to get the light, it had to be 9, 10 o'clock, when obviously everyone's bloody out in the street, aren't they? So people did see that, and I wanted to show this. I'm calling it an outtake. I don't know if that's the correct thing, but. It was kind of based on pure chance of whether the traffic was going past us, whether we could film it in time or whatever. And there's some kind of nice things where people were interacting with us as part of the film. And this, you recognise, this is one of the panels of the piece downstairs. And
we're just doing some filming. That's what I was wearing at my wedding. I haven't finished putting everything on, but we're just going to do a bit of filming for his work. This is weird. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's really cool. So I really want to get the filming done and go back home. Yeah. Thank you.
I mean, I would have left that one in actually, but it just ended up too long to fit into the piece. But again, it was this really, it made it really real in terms of this idea of filming something at your home and the domesticity of what's going on there.
Well, certainly some audience participation in that one.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And moving on to the images of Eva then, and the body art and the Mendi, and the sort of displaced heritage of Mendi now, from your perspective. There's something in the writing where you talk about failed love letters, searching for a way to frame your life with hers through the examining ideas of self. What do you mean by this?
Not sure. No, sorry, I'm just showing these at the same time as well. It's looks quite raw. This once the Mendi had been kind of taken off and the kind of stains that it leaves behind.
So are these failed love letters?
Well, when I speak to Eva about them, she says that it's a bit harsh to call it a failed love letter. It's kind of, it's. I guess I think I call them a failed love letter because it's not in the truest and sincerest form, of what I feel for Eva. It's kind of, it's with a nod to someone's reading this, or it's with a nod to, trying to be almost scientific about it. It's almost trying to be unemotional about it, if you like. Just this idea, the idea for if anyone has not kind of read it yet, the text. This was kind of a maybe talk about that the text kind of talks about this, this kind of cliched phrase, if you like, of this idea of, you complete me, of this idea of two people being a part of a whole, if you like, in a relationship, and then saying, okay, maybe you and art complete me, and, okay, maybe you and art and my mum's curry complete me. Sort of this ever-growing list of these things that you might consider as in whatever way to build up who you are. So it's kind of, it goes into this big listing idea. So I guess that's what is meant by what I kind of clumsily say.
Yeah.
Failed.
I suppose that the relationship between man and wife or partners is often an ongoing negotiation of some sort. And noted that in this exhibition you look at the diptych, triptych kind of images. And from what I was observing, there is a real intimacy between the two characters, but there is this void between them too. This separation, and yet there could be two magnets coming together, but we're not seeing that at this stage. What is this void? Is there a void, or is there an intimate distance?
I think it feels like something I'm still trying to articulate. It still feels so new to me. I mean, I guess the early intentions of that is that you would split an image up. I would always shoot my photographs at home, even the older ones, but on a studio backdrop. So this lighting looks very slick, and it doesn't look like a home. And I'm still doing that, really. And so I guess I wanted to have a nod towards that. So the way that the images are split up, for example, when you see them in a triptych or a diptych, if you consider this image here on the right, maybe even without me in it or whatever, this is the kind of image that I might compose into a studio shot, and influenced by the kind of fashion imagery that I might have seen or whatever, and then to put it together with this image. I guess is, on a very basic level, the reveal of the domestic setting that it happens in. So not just to talk about the formalization of how I make artwork, but also those kind of blurring middle grounds of creating and discussing identity for art, but also how it happens in real life. How Eva and I discuss our relationship, not just in terms of man and wife, but in terms of me being an artist and her being having a producer role with artists and a curator role, and how that and how our relationship works in that way. So it's kind of it's looking at some sort of intending to display some sort of tension or separation or dislocation around those things.
Oh, that's fascinating. Okay. In this series of works, you're reclaiming how the use of Mendi, I feel, which is an ancient art form in itself, and the patterns are obviously really defined historically, but you redefine them based on the context within which you're living and working. Just explain what that means.
I guess in all of these new works, you don't see any traditional henna patterning. Sorry, there's a little beatbox flavour. I guess that's about this idea. I don't necessarily feel, and this is a recurring thing in my work, I don't necessarily feel a level of authority to be able to command an art form which might be considered Indian, or if you like. So I don't necessarily, in terms of being married to Eva, she's not from an Indian background, she's Spanish French. So in terms of our exchange, what is it that I would give to her or to exchange with her that is of something Indian or from that side of my heritage? And I can't help but feel a bit fraudulent in attempting to do that. So, it's this idea that I couldn't put a traditional patterning onto her, that I'd feel a fraud to do that. So actually the things that I put onto her are the things that I do take ownership over, Spider-Man. and Bruce Lee and these things that I feel like have genuinely shaped who I am.
On the Bruce Lee, taking his marital advice was an interesting twist to the tale.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd expect him to give advice on, how to strike a precise punch or maybe something of spiritual revelation in regard to body and mind, but marriage advice, where did you get that from?
I've got this book, which is The Teachings of Bruce Lee.
Okay.
That's been compiled by his wife.
Okay.
And
nice.
And there's all these amazing phrases which you can probably reel off from films and stuff that he's famous for. And I guess it's the humorous element to the work that I like to put in. Of I noticed there's this section. Fair enough, he's got advice about punching and living and but there's marriage advice in there. How you should live your life. And I was like, what's this doing here? It's kind of ridiculous. So I love that. I love the idea that you would take Bruce Lee's advice on how to run a marriage.
You haven't got the words for that on your screen by any chance. It'd be interesting to just to see what that advice is again. It didn't make much sense yesterday when I read it.
It's good to know.
I'm not sure I'm going to apply that when I get home, if I ever get home. Interesting though, Hetain. I mean, the work that you are reclaiming cultural identity in some shape or form, or you're redefining or exploring it. Here we go. So what does it say?
So I should explain. This is I don't know how well it works, and it might not be that great. If you read comic books, if you have a conversation between two people, you will have it in this way, so that the order of the conversation, depending on how high the speech bubbles are, goes from left to the right one, to the right, to this, to this. Mm-hmm. So it goes from this, and the speech bubble there on ever is what I would be saying, and well, what Bruce Lee says about marriage, and that happiness is derived from the ordinary, that happiness that is derived from ordinary life lasts longer. Like coal, it burns gradually and slowly. The happiness that is derived from excitement is like a brilliant fire. Soon it will go out. And then I guess the thing of, what's Bruce Lee got to do with marriage? As well, I used to wish I was Bruce Lee. So I guess it's I guess it's not a serious thing. It's partly overlapped from the interest in Spider-Man of using speech bubbles.
Yes, so it's playful, and it brings in the kind of comic book aesthetic into a conceptual visual arts exhibition and expression, which is quite intriguing, because you have quite, from your earlier influences, populist references that then feature here, or then are toyed with or played with. Now, talking about cultural identity, I was just about to ask you actually about how you were received in, say, India, at Chatterjee and Lal's gallery in Mumbai, and that, did they find your work interesting? Did they get the British humour? Did they get the new idioms of identity and all this?
In some ways, it's hard to say because, of course, people will say to me, "Oh, this is nice," or whatever. So, people said really lovely things to me about the work, and got a lot of good reactions. So, in a way, I would try to get a more accurate version of what people made of the work through Morton Thara in terms of what people say to them. Because I like to think hopefully they'll be honest with them about what they actually feel about the work and things. So I think people were generally kind of quite excited by To Dance Like Your Dad and by Mumai, which was a huge relief to me because especially with Mumai in India, and please help me on this if I say something stupid.
Do feel free to come in if more.
But in India, kind of artists who deal with kind of diasporic issues are seen with kind of a very careful eye. It can be that some artists use Indian references to decorate their works or to objectify India in some ways, and so I was very conscious about this, and it's one of the things I was nervous about in bringing Mumai and all of my works actually to India, and and I felt like hopefully that's not how it was received.
Do you want to come in here, Tara, about how the work was received by, say, Indian audiences?
Well, I mean, Hetain and I have been discussing this very problem, because there are
Yes.
problematics about diaspora artists showing in India, and as Hetain said, there have been past examples in our own case of
Yes.
showing artists who we really loved the work, brought it to India and found local audiences have been fairly resistant to some of the ways that Indian culture portrayed through diasporic experience, and at some level local audiences feel, well, on what, as you've been saying, on what authority is this projection of Indian culture being made, given the fact that there's a distancing. And it's funny that in the poster you've had up at the beginning, the funny poster of there's the Critics' Choice Time Out. Time Out Mumbai is probably the most important platform there is for exploring kind of contemporary arts in India. It's been the one platform that's been extremely critical of diaspora, often of diaspora artists showing in. And I mean, it was testament to Hitain's show that it was Critics' Choice, I think three issues in a row, which really means it became very much a part of the city's sort of the fabric of that season's art events. If you want me to say something which kind of goes a little more critical,
Yes,
I would say that one area we were fairly conscious of is if 10, for example, was transported to India, what would happen?
Right.
And I think we all felt that 10 might be a harder proposition to present to a local audience than the works which you see downstairs, the new art exchange commissions.
That's very interesting. So, from a sort of visual, conceptual point of view, you were a hit and a success at Hetain, so to get 3 in a row from the journal. Fantastic. Thank you, Mark. Okay. Let's move to future space, future plans, and let's look at where you're going. Because you did come back from the Indian art. Actually, just on the India theme, you did go to Indian Art Fair as part of your journey recently. What were the learnings from that experience in terms of, did you see the expression of Indian artists offering something of significance and interest for yourself?
I guess it's the first time I'd been there, and I guess like art fairs are turning into art fairs, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're kind of big places where galleries have booths and show works. And I think what I found most interesting is how Western galleries are starting to make a presence in India now. So like and what Western galleries kind of, you see Listen there and White Cube and those kind of places, and there was talk about whether some of those galleries might be actually setting up shop in India and opening a White Cube or a Listen or whatever in India. So I think I found that interesting in terms of
So the business dynamic and the economics.
I guess that's essentially what it comes from. But I guess I was thinking more in terms of the influx of in and out of artists and work both in and out of India now.
And India also showing artists of non-Indian origin more so in the gallery spaces as well.
And people who you would expect might have already had shows there, like, was it last year or the year before that it was Anish Kapoor's first, I was going to say first major show, but first show ever. You know, it was Anish Kapoor's first show ever in India. Was it last year?
January 2011.
Last year, like, who would have thought?
Yes.
You know,
He was originally from there.
And same in the performing arts. Shobhana Jaisingh, British choreographer, who I guess in the choreographer world is probably the Anish Kapoor in British terms of choreographer. She only had her first ever tour in India at the same time. You know, so it's I think all that was really
with a billion people plus possibly, it must be highly competitive to feature in India. But there is a distinct narrative that is significantly different, or is it? Is the contemporary art world so global now that it's becoming very much a similar style and aesthetic? Is that something that you've observed in India? contrasting with sort of Europe?
I don't know.
No.
I mean, of course, you do see art that looks like art,
Yes.
you know, and you know that naturally draws suspicion. But
Mhm.
but I don't know what I mean by that. It's kind of yeah. I guess it comes from this naive, romantic ideal when you become an artist, that you go to different countries and that contemporariness, if you like, within the arts or whatever, will be different
Mhm.
depending on the contemporary of
Yeah.
that it is, and of course it is, but not as much as I don't know as
Yeah. Well,
and
it's,
it's
I
not really
suppose-
just it's not that it's just India, with
No,
China,
it's not
with,
at all,
with,
yeah.
with everywhere, you know.
I suppose the shrinking of time and space through that whole global
Yeah,
exchange.
of course. I mean, I guess it's
That's
because of all that.
Creating that collaborative spirit. But it is good that we're beginning to see that featuring in different parts of the world, including India. Okay, let's move on. We'll get on to some Q&As with the audience in just a moment. But okay, so where next then, Hetain? Of course, we're looking to get that home, travelling across the UK and Europe, and possibly worldwide. It's featured some of the works in India already, which is brilliant. What are your future plans? Because I know that you have many.
I just want to make work.
Yes.
It sounds a very simple thing to say, but I guess what I mean more accurately is that I feel like there's been a progression between doing lots of other kinds of little bitty work, which are still arts related, in order to give you time to make your artwork. And now I feel like I'm in a position a little bit more that I'm doing slightly lesser numbers of projects, but that each one is meatier. And that now I'm able to kind of direct each one so that they all talk to each other, that each one feeds each other, and that they feed me as an artist, and that they challenge me. And I just want to, and I'm really enjoying moving between context and media because it helps me feel freer in creating something, in expressing something. So I guess I just want to continue doing that and feel freer to create and to make, regardless of photography or video or theatre or comedy or sculpture
So if we were to look at the Hetain Patel brand in the art world, 5 to 10 years from now, where would you see yourself? Tough one, I know. It's hard.
Maybe here having a conversation with you, Skinder, about the 5-year exhibition after this one.
Fantastic thought. Okay, let's open it out to the audience then. A couple of questions here. Kathy first, and then...
One of the things that fascinated me about your early career was the creative collaboration and the mentoring relationship with Amsterdam. Can you tell us a bit about that? Because that was...
Yeah.
There was an amazingly memorable set of performances coming out of that. So do just tell us a bit about that.
Ansuman Biswas is this incredible being. I met him at an art conference, and he somewhere along this art conference talking about art, he started going, and because and I was like, what the hell? And then within 5 minutes he'd convinced us this was science. And I bought it, and I was like, oh, teach me, I kind of stalked him, and he agreed to teach me how to play the Indian tabla drums, and I would go around to his house, and this started a journey of him unofficially, and then later officially becoming a great mentor of mine. And what I loved about him is that he was so chameleon-like. For a project I wanted to do with him, I had to ask for a CV, and he sent me a CV. And I thought it was a joke CV. It said stuff like, exhibiting visual art at the Tate Modern, translating Tagore poetry for the Royal Shakespeare Company, wandering with minstrels in Tibet, sculpting objects in the Red Sea, touring with Bjork and Oasis, this ridiculous list of stuff, and I couldn't place him of what he was, and then the way he would teach me, which maybe all tabla teachers do, wasn't about the drums. I felt like it was about life and thinking, how to open up your thinking, and I should maybe mention Vipassana meditation here. He's a big practice of this practice Vipassana meditation, which I eventually got into as well briefly, and it's very much about I guess about self in a way of being aware of things, of being aware of your own body on a very minute level, and thus being aware of lots of other things and accepting things as they are. And I really felt that this was the center of him, and yeah, I learned so much about how to approach things, and he would never say do this, or it was through example, and the way he talked about life really influenced me. And we did some performances together, one of which was at Lakeside Art Centre, where we did a 12-hour, I think it was 12-hour drumming performance together. So we were just in a space in between the cafe and the box office, and we were just drumming tabla drums for 12 hours non-stop. I think we probably had one loo break each in that time, and we just stayed there, and it became this meditative process, and this incredible process whereby strange things happen, like parents would go and sit in the cafe, and their kids would come and sit, and it almost became like a creche, but in a way you wouldn't expect. Like, young toddlers would sit there for an hour, just watching, these two guys play the drums. Like,
Brilliant.
So yeah, I feel like he was a real, and I saw him recently. He came to a show I did at the South Bank, and he's still doing mad things, and he was a real big inspiration to me.
And there's a question here.
I'm asking that as a fine art student. How important is it for contemporary artists to break their own boundaries? And does that mean that artists should give up on having any sort of being in that state of rawness or reveal or
That they should give up their
on boundaries, on having any boundaries, and they sort of live in that state of rawness or vulnerability?
It's a funny thing when people ask you what you are, and you say an artist. If they're not in the arts, or if they're not an artist, they say, wow, you must be free. You do what you want. And actually that can be rubbish. If you can be anything but free. If you make photography work, you'll be called a photographer. And then if this continues, you'll continue to make photographs, because you might start to feel at that stage that you're getting support, that this is what I do, this is what people want. And I find that very, very dangerous. So in a way, felt like it was one of the reasons that I wanted to try to get rid of that label. I was called a photographer for the first 2 years of my practice, and I wasn't comfortable with it, because I didn't see myself as a photographer. I didn't know what I did see myself as, but I knew I wasn't a photographer. So through going through these media, I feel like you have to consciously hold yourself to account every step of the way of, is this what you want to be doing, and why are you doing this? Why are you making photographs, or why do you make videos, or why do you make live work? Why do you do them all? Is there something that can be cut away that you just do out of habit that isn't feeding you anymore? So I feel like it's not just about art, it's just about you as a person. It's kind of, they're intertwined. It's like anything that you do in your life, it's kind of trying to live it more holistically, so that you'll kind of respond to the now. What is it that you need now, and that feeds you now, and that helps you express something out there, and what can be cut off and cut away that is there through something habitual that is not there for any reason, but it weighs you down along the way. So I think it's too easily thought that if you're an artist that you're free to think and to express. So I think it's not just what other people think, but you as an artist. I think you can become your own worst enemy, in terms of essentially these barriers that are put on it is not from anyone else, it's from you. As of you thinking if you hear it a few times, maybe you start to think of yourself as just this. So it's kind of trying to challenge that of how you are, how you be.
And there's a question here, and then Paul.
Yeah,
Adrian?
it's more like an exploration. I was sitting with Blackfeather looking at your grandmother's thing there. Very fascinating. I agree. It's probably most, for me, the most powerful work in the show. I was thinking earlier on these sort of tensions. I mean, no man is an island kind of thing. Art is particularly interesting because you've got the, especially with the backgrounds, that you have the Asian and yet the British tension. Expectations of the family, but also expectations in terms of how you portray that and what influence it has on you. But coupled with that, I'm sort of investigating this now as with you. The idea of separate and together. I think of Khalil Gibran, I mean, this thing here, for example, these separate trees in the forest together. There's a slippage, you know. There's a slippage between how you portray slippage in your work. You know, there is a dichotomy, a breakdown. And the thing that Blackfeather and I were thinking about was the hand, 5 fingers, why 5 screens? They're separate but together. You know, there's sort of elements there. And then coupled with that, looking at what you might explore this in the future. I don't know, have you thought of, for example, I was looking at the work by recently the Royal Academy of Hockney. And he's interested in multiple screen images and multiple camera techniques in terms of exploring the idea of separation of time, the distance between people, a sort of an alienation almost, but still interrelating with each other. It's a kind of, and related to that, one more thing is for me, one of the major influences of my work certainly is Hopper. You know, you look at his paintings even, and they could be done in a video. Imagine doing it today with multiple screens, multiple images, splitting screens of people being separate and together. They might be related or might not be. There's a tension there. Just some ideas.
There's many points there, Adrian. So,
I think the idea of multiples in my work, one of the reasons I'm interested in is this idea of memory, of you know, and the pieces downstairs, the photography works. The reason that the same shoot, if you like, or one of the reasons that the same shoot is shot in a couple of different ways, is almost like kind of referencing how you might remember. You know, if you didn't have this photograph, how would you remember this incident? You know, if this was a real conversation between Eva and I, you know, I might say, you know, we were just sat there talking, and she might say, no, you were doing kung fu impressions, you know. So I quite like the idea of then again of the same shoot being shot and cut up in different ways.
It's like that famous song. I remember it well. You know, I was here, you were there. You said this, I said that. You know?
Yeah.
yes,
I remember it. Yeah.
it's playing with that. And Paul, you had a question.
Yeah, I've got so many questions actually. Because your work comes into so many things that I'm really interested in. But I think in terms of, I'm really interested in your almost obsessive focus on the body, and the body as a vessel, the body as a kind of locus for transmission of identity, and how you use that to ask all sorts of questions. And I'm just thinking about, I was recently kind of reading the Fiden book around the artist body. I don't know if you've seen that book.
Yeah.
Which kind of has lots of examples of how artists use body, you know, within their work. And of course, what comes out of that is how intensely political a lot of that work was, particularly in the 70s and early 80s. And I'm thinking about, for example, the whole way that feminists use that kind of the body in a very political way. A lot of your work, the early works remind me a bit of Zhang Huan, the Chinese artist, where he covers his body with all kinds of texts and writing, but also challenges his body in a physical sense as well. So I guess there's 2 parts of the question. One is, how do you relate to that body of so-called political work or performative work, which is quite challenging to the actual body itself? Is that something that you would be interested in exploring at some point? You know, I mean, if you didn't, I understand, because a lot of that stuff's really scary. You know? So it's that aspect to it, the physical aspect of it. How much of the physicality do you engage with in terms of your exploration of the body? And the second thing is about this question of the political, because I sense partly that you use humour in your work at various points to mediate some of the conflicts or some of the kinds of slippages around the transmission of identity, or around, for example, your uneasiness about the cultural authority issue. humour comes in to kind of mediate that relationship. And in some way that can be read as either, you know, quite an interesting political strategy to kind of, the way that humour can be a way to diffuse it in some way. But it also can be read as a way of, of deflecting attention from that particular person. So I guess the two-part question is, one, where does physicality and that history of physicality in body art relate to your work? And secondly, how do you engage the political in your work?
Yeah. Okay, so the physical aspect of it, I guess a lot of those kind of works and stuff, I do find scary. You know, I kind of, for lots of reasons.
It's a scary book, actually.
The furthest that I've gone in terms of physically attacking the body, if you like, is through the durational in a different way. So through the 12-hour drumming, or through being in a space for 8 hours, marking myself, albeit not with a knife or anything. It's kind of onto the surface. That's the furthest I've gone with that. And the reason, in some ways, that I moved away from that is because I was aware of my mindset as I engage with that sort of performance. So I find it quite meditative. So it becomes a very personal thing of where I, in some ways, start to question why there's even an audience. So, you know, I'm in some ways I wasn't sure what I was getting from people watching me do those things. You know, it felt like it was something internal for me, that in order to watch it, that you would also have to be in that mind state, and then you would be concerned with yourself and not me anyway. So I guess I started to move away from that, because I felt if I was doing that as an artwork, then I felt I was being less successful in engaging an audience in a way that I wanted to engage them. So but I still wanted the element of having to put some sort of discipline onto myself. So I still like the idea that I would have to go through something. So instead of doing those kind of scary things, the thing of going through something is the dedication of time. So, you know,
the definition of come through as well. That term going through actually means energy required to work over time.
Right.
And it can apply to anything, not necessarily to martial arts. It can apply to cooking, to any activity.
I kind
of got that in the work as well.
And that, you know, it's me going through this. So I do it because it's important to me. I get a lot from this process, and I find it interesting to embed these things into my body and into my words and voice. But then in terms of engaging it with an audience and expressing it in some ways, I like the idea that you don't need to be in that state of mind, that the humorous aspect or the short 8-minute video aspect of it synchronizing is a way that you can engage with that. I feel that you to kind of lessen that gap between what I'm putting myself through and you feeling it as an audience, as a viewer. I'm not. Things, of course, could change, but at the minute, I can't see myself wanting to go further into this idea of. I keep saying attacking the body. That's not what I want to say, but you know what? I probably wouldn't do it. I am interested in that kind of thing, which again, where this Vipassana meditation comes in, but only for myself, not for an audience. In terms of the politicized body. In a way, the use of humour in our work is, you know, if I'm honest, is a way to avoid some of this. Yeah. You know, it is a way to deflect, and you know, I don't know where I stand on a lot of these things. You know, I'm confused by it, and I find it a challenge to use as much as I need to use my body. I find it a challenge to use it because of everything that has been put on it through history. You know, all of that goes before me, I'm completely aware of, even just as an image, before you have any text, before you have a composition, whatever, just this body being there. You know, I'm kind of really aware of that, and I'm almost annoyed by it. You know, I'm almost annoyed at having to deal with that, or I just want to, you know, it's like, I just wish I could start afresh and do something with this body that isn't, you know. So I guess the use of humour is deflecting that, but it's a good point, mate. Maybe it's something I'm going to have to...
Yeah, I can definitely, sorry, just one last point. I can definitely see how various artists or political people would come at you and come back at you like that. But in a way, I think you also, what I think is quite interesting about it is that you're also refusing in a way the burden of representation, that kind of heavy burden. And I think we talked about this before. A lot of artists, perhaps, an early generation, sort of felt obliged to carry literally in their work, and your work has a sort of lightness about it. And so I think you're being very open about addressing that.
Okay.
To see how it develops as well.
Question from Paul Gladstone, conscious we've got only 5 minutes to go, so Paul?
It's quick then. The artistic use of the body has been here as a kind of locus for mediating identity and politicising identity. Going on for quite some time now. It's heavily institutionalised in many ways. When I hear you speak, there's a certain kind of dissatisfaction in relation to your own practice. You've talked about problems about the kind of self-exoticization of the body and orientalisation of the body. And I think you've also spoken about reaching a stage where you're kind of moving beyond your old modes of practice into new modes of practice. I wonder if there's anything that you could say about that in relation or the relationship between your work and a critical view of institutionalised forms of artistic uses of the body as a locus of mediation.
I'm going to have to answer it assuming I understood. But I'm trying... I think I know what you're saying.
Are you conscious of criticising kind of status quo in terms of the way that artists use the body in terms of artistic?
I am aware of it, but much less so than... I work very instinctively, and which might appear contradictory to me framing things in a particular way and editing things to synchronize, but I genuinely do, including showing works at a point where I'm not quite sure what they are. But it's kind of... So I feel like it's another thing that I want to not have to deal with. And not because I'm not engaged with it intellectually, it's because I feel like I feel that it holds me back from making work. I feel like in order to be truthful, to express something with my body, I have to listen to it. And that comes from what's around me now, and what comes into me and is around me, and I feel like it's this which I enjoy doing. At that instinctive level of making something, about thinking something, and of course, and then all of those questions that you say about criticality, about politicise, they come after, and in terms of I sort of make the work, and then I think, shit, this is going to be, people are going to say this, or like downstairs there's a picture of one of the Ever series, which Paul was talking to me about yesterday, which has a bowl of fruit, in terms of reference to art history, and I thought, oh yeah, of course that's going to happen. I'm going to think of an answer to that, I almost feel like that a bit, but it's not that, I'm completely interested in talking about that, but I guess it just feels like the more work that I make, I feel like my excitement zone is making it from that impulse or something and I feel like it reminds me more of when I was a student, to start half making something and then engage with that, and then the idea dies in my sketchbook because I've just beat it up to death, and I think I can't do that. I think it would stop me making work. I'm very interested to engage with it once it's out there, but I think I wouldn't have been able to make any of these works if I think I would have been held back, felt intimidated by it. I don't know if that answers it.
Okay, I guess that concludes, unless there are any final comments, final thoughts. Gone then. Fine. Can I therefore thank Hetain Patel for a wonderful insight and such an honest insight into your life, history and future with regard to art and culture. Please. course, the gallery is open till 5, so you can get a chance to see the works again and again and again. And do engage with our public programme. We have a series of walk and talks on every other Saturday. We have further talks from Paul Gladstone, our academic in resident. We will also have Frank Abbott, Michael Pinchbeck speaking and giving some very interesting perspectives, reflecting on the exhibition. And we will have the walk and talks by friends, colleagues, and possibly family members. I think Eva's doing one as well on one of the Saturdays, so it's brilliant. And do come to those and hear the insights, because it's very interesting actually to hear individualized perspectives on the work. There's often something new that one hears and learns about, and if we can expand our knowledge, wisdom for a better place, then that's a great start to a new world of art. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Thanks a lot.